You know what's absolutely wild? Right now, there are over 20,000 satellites orbiting Earth, like right above your head. And here's the thing that might shock you. Most people think satellites are what bring them internet. That when you're watching YouTube or scrolling Instagram, those satellites are beaming the video directly down to your phone. But that's not what's happening at all. Here's what nobody tells you about satellites and the internet. For most of us in America, satellites have almost nothing to do with getting YouTube to load on your phone. But they're doing something way more important behind the scenes. Something that makes the entire internet possible in ways you've probably never thought about. In the next 15 minutes, you're gonna understand exactly how satellites actually help you watch YouTube and why this invisible infrastructure changes everything about how the modern world actually works. Because once you see what's really happening up there, you'll never look at the sky the same way again. Here's what's really happening when you pull out your iPhone at Starbucks and open YouTube. You tap on a video. Maybe it's someone explaining how satellites work, ironically. The video loads in like 2 seconds. You can skip around, pause, resume. Feels seamless. And here's what most people assume is happening. They figure the video is coming from space. That somewhere up there, a satellite is beaming that content directly to their phone. Picture this scenario. You're at your apartment in Brooklyn or Phoenix or wherever. It's Tuesday night. You're procrastinating on work by watching compilation videos of funny pets. Your Wi-Fi is working perfectly. The video quality is crystal clear. You're not even thinking about how this is possible. Why would you? It just works. But if someone asked you how it works, what would you say? Most people would say something like, well, satellites send signals down to Earth, and that's how we get internet. Makes sense, right? Satellites are up there. Internet comes from somewhere. Must be the satellites. That's the logical connection your brain makes. Everyone tells you that satellites revolutionized communication and made global internet possible, and that's absolutely true. But that's not the whole story. What really happens is way more interesting and way more complex than signals beaming down from space directly to your phone. Because if you're in a city or suburb in America, your YouTube video probably didn't touch a satellite at all. Not in the way you think. And this matters because the way the internet actually works, the real infrastructure that makes everything possible, is completely invisible to most people. You think it's all wireless and floating through the air, but the truth is way more grounded, literally. Most of your data is traveling through cables buried underground and running along the ocean floor. The satellites are doing something different, something most people never learn about. It's not just about getting content from point A to point B. It's about timing, coordination, and making sure the entire global network stays synchronized. And that's where satellites become absolutely critical in ways that have nothing to do with beaming YouTube videos to your phone. There's this pattern I've noticed that I call the invisible backbone. This is when the most important infrastructure is completely hidden from view, so you never realize it's there. And satellites are the perfect example of this. When you load a YouTube video, here's what's actually happening. Your phone connects to Wi-Fi or cellular data. That signal goes to your router or your cell tower. From there, it travels through fiber optic cables, basically glass threads thinner than human hair that carry light signals at incredible speeds. Those cables connect to bigger cables that run through your city, connecting cities to each other, and eventually connecting to massive undersea cables that cross entire oceans. It's like when you order something from Amazon. You click buy now, and 2 days later it shows up at your door. You know, there's a whole logistics system making that happen, trucks, planes, warehouses, delivery drivers, but you don't see any of it. The infrastructure is invisible until something breaks. Same thing with the internet. You see your phone and you see the video. Everything in between is hidden. This matters because satellites aren't in that direct path from YouTube's servers to your phone, at least not for most Americans. Your data is traveling through cables, not space. So what are satellites actually doing? They're providing something way more fundamental. They're keeping time. Think about Jessica. Jessica lives in Seattle. She's watching a YouTube video that was uploaded by someone in Tokyo. That video is stored on Google's servers, probably in multiple data centers across different continents. When Jessica clicks play, the system has to coordinate dozens of different computers and routers and switches to deliver that video smoothly. Every single one of those devices needs to know the exact time down to the nanosecond. That's a billionth of a second to keep everything synchronized. If the timing is off by even a tiny amount, everything breaks. Your video would buffer, websites would load wrong, your bank transaction might process twice or not at all. The entire internet depends on every computer agreeing on what time it is right now with incredible precision. And here's what Jessica doesn't realize. That perfect timing is coming from satellites, specifically from GPS satellites. Your brain actually does something similar when you're having a conversation with multiple people. Everyone needs to take turns speaking. If the timing is off and everyone talks at once, communication breaks down. The internet has the same problem, but at a scale of billions of devices. Satellites solve this by being the ultimate referee that everyone checks to stay synchronized. But here's where it gets interesting. There's another pattern that's even more critical. I call it the redundancy web. This is when satellites provide backup systems that most people never use, but are absolutely essential when the primary system fails. So we've got all these undersea cables carrying most of the internet's data. There are literally hundreds of cables running along the ocean floor, connecting continents. The US to Europe, the US to Asia, Asia to Australia. These cables carry something like 99% of international data. They're incredibly efficient and fast. But here's the problem. Cables break, ships drop anchors on them, earthquakes damage them. Sharks bite them, yes. Actually, sharks have damaged undersea cables. When that happens, the internet doesn't just stop working, because there's a backup system. Satellites provide alternative routes for critical data when cables fail. It's not ideal, satellite connections are slower and more expensive, but they keep essential services running while the cable gets repaired, which can take weeks depending on where the break happened. It's like how your phone has cellular data and Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is faster and unlimited, but if Wi-Fi goes down, you've got cellular as backup. You take a hit on speed and maybe you have limited data, but you're not completely cut off. Satellites do that for the entire internet infrastructure at a global scale. This matters because you never notice this redundancy until it saves you. In 2006, an earthquake near Taiwan severed multiple undersea cables connecting Asia to the rest of the world. Internet speeds slowed dramatically across Asia, but they didn't stop completely. Satellite connections picked up the critical traffic while repairs happened. Most people in the US never even noticed because their traffic was rerouted automatically. Here's what makes this even more surprising. Let me tell you about two people who live in completely different situations. There's Marcus in downtown Chicago, and there's Amy in rural Montana. Marcus is watching YouTube on his phone while riding the L train to work. His video loads instantly. He can switch between videos with no lag. His connection is rock solid even though he's moving through tunnels underground. Marcus assumes satellites must be involved somehow because how else would wireless internet work? But here's what's actually happening. His phone connects to cell towers. Those towers connect to fiber optic cables running through the city. That data never goes to space. It's all ground-based infrastructure. The satellites are just providing the timing signal that keeps everything coordinated. Now watch what happens with Amy. Amy lives on a ranch 40 miles from the nearest town. No cable company services her area. No fiber optic lines. She's too far from any cell tower to get reliable cellular data. For years, her internet was painfully slow DSL over ancient phone lines, like 2 megabits per second, if she was lucky. Watching YouTube was basically impossible. But then, she got Starlink, Elon Musk's satellite internet service. Now Amy has a little dish on her roof pointing at the sky. Her internet comes directly from satellites in low Earth orbit. They're only about 340 miles up instead of 22,000 miles like traditional satellites. That closer distance means faster speeds and lower delay. Amy now gets download speeds around 100 megabits per second from satellites. She can watch YouTube in 4K, she can video chat with her kids who moved to Denver, all because satellites are finally good enough to be her primary internet connection. Notice how Marcus never needs satellites for data, even though he assumes he does? While Amy absolutely depends on them, even though most people forget about rural internet, that's because satellite internet exists for places where cables can't reach. For Marcus in Chicago, cables are everywhere. For Amy in Montana, satellites are the only option. This connects to something even deeper. There's another role satellites play that almost nobody talks about. I call it the global positioning layer. And this is where things get really wild. GPS satellites, the ones that tell your phone where you are, they're not just for mapping and navigation. They're providing a constant stream of incredibly precise time signals to everything that connects to the internet. Every cell tower, every data center, every major router, they all have GPS receivers that constantly check what time it is according to the satellites. Why does this matter so much? Because when data travels through the internet, it gets split into tiny packets. Like if you're watching a YouTube video, that video gets broken into thousands of little chunks. Each chunk gets sent separately and might take a different route through the internet. Some might go through Seattle, others through Dallas, others through Miami. Then they all arrive at your phone and get reassembled in the right order. But how does your phone know what order to put them in? Timestamps. Each packet has a timestamp saying exactly when it was sent, down to the nanosecond. Your phone uses those timestamps to reconstruct the video in the correct sequence. If the timestamps are wrong, your video plays out of order or freezes or glitches. The whole system depends on everyone agreeing on the exact time. And satellites provide that universal time reference. It's like how a symphony orchestra needs a conductor to keep everyone playing in sync. The violins need to come in at the same moment as the cellos. If everyone's playing at their own tempo, it's chaos. Satellites are the conductor for the entire internet, keeping billions of devices synchronized so data flows smoothly. Your brain does this too when you're watching a movie. Your eyes and ears process information at slightly different speeds. Your brain has to synchronize those signals so the audio matches the video. If that synchronization is off, you'd notice immediately the lips wouldn't match the words. The internet has the same challenge but across billions of devices and trillions of data packets every second. But here's what nobody wants to admit. This whole system is incredibly fragile. We've built a global civilization that depends on these satellites working perfectly all the time. And there are only about 30 GPS satellites providing timing for pretty much everything. If those satellites went down, it's not just your Maps app that stops working. The internet starts falling apart within hours, banking systems fail, power grids destabilize, cell towers lose synchronization. What's actually happening is we've created a single point of failure that most people don't even know exists. This isn't about being paranoid. It's about understanding that the infrastructure we depend on every single day is way more vulnerable than it appears. Countries know this. That's why China built their own GPS system called Beidou. Europe built Galileo. Russia has GLONASS. Everyone wants their own satellites because they realize how critical this timing function is. And once you see this, you can't unsee it. Every time you watch YouTube, you're depending on satellites. Not to deliver the video directly, but to keep the entire system synchronized. Not to send data through space, but to tell every computer on Earth what time it is so they can coordinate properly. The satellites aren't the delivery truck. They're the clock that makes sure all the delivery trucks arrive in the right order. Let me tell you about two different people and how they think about internet infrastructure. There's Kevin. Kevin lives in Austin, works in tech, uses the internet all day, every day. Kevin thinks he understands how it works. He knows about servers and routers and bandwidth, but Kevin assumes it's all wireless now. He figures satellites and 5G have replaced cables, that the internet just floats through the air. Here's what Kevin doesn't realize. He's wrong about almost everything. When he's in his apartment using Wi-Fi, that signal goes to his router, then to a cable modem, then to cables running through his building, through his neighborhood, across the city, across the country, and under the ocean to wherever the data lives. It's all cables. The only wireless parts are the last 20 feet from his router to his laptop, and the GPS timing signals keeping everything synchronized. Kevin has convinced himself we live in this wireless future, but we actually live in a wired present with wireless convenience layers on top. And because Kevin doesn't understand this, he makes assumptions. He thinks rural internet is just a coverage problem, like if we had more satellites or more towers, everyone would have fast internet. But that's not how it works. The real limitation is getting fiber optic cables to remote areas. Satellites can help, but they're still the backup option, not the primary solution. Now compare that to Diana. Diana lives in Denver, works as a network engineer. Diana understands that the internet is overwhelmingly cable-based. She knows that undersea cables carry the vast majority of data. She knows satellites are mainly for timing, backup, and serving areas where cables can't reach. When Diana helps someone troubleshoot their slow internet, she looks at the physical infrastructure. Are the cables old? Is there congestion at the local node? Is the Wi-Fi signal weak because of interference? Diana gets that satellites are critical, but they're not magic. They serve specific functions in a much larger system. And because Diana understands the real architecture, she can actually solve problems instead of just making guesses based on what seems like it should be true. Notice how Kevin feels confident about his understanding, but is actually working from assumptions? While Diana has accurate knowledge because she looked beyond what's visible, that's the fundamental difference. Kevin sees wireless connections and assumes everything is wireless. Diana understands that most of the infrastructure is invisible precisely because it works so well. Here's what most people don't realize about satellites and the internet. It's not actually about satellites bringing you content from space. It's about satellites providing the foundational timing that makes the entire system possible. The people who understand the internet best aren't the ones who think satellites are beaming YouTube videos to their phones. They understand that satellites are the invisible metronome keeping billions of devices synchronized. And once you see it this way, everything changes about how you think about infrastructure. The most important parts aren't the ones you see or interact with directly. They're the foundational layers that enable everything else to work. Your YouTube video loads because of cables in the ground and timing signals from space, both working together in ways you never notice when everything's working right. So here's what we've uncovered. Satellites aren't delivering your YouTube videos to your phone in most cases. Your data is traveling through fiber optic cables that run through cities and across ocean floors. But satellites are doing something equally important. They're providing the precise timing signals that keep every computer on the internet synchronized. Without that synchronization, the whole system falls apart. Plus, satellites serve as the critical backup when cables fail. They're the redundancy layer that keeps essential services running during emergencies. And for people in remote areas where cables don't reach, satellites are increasingly becoming a viable primary option for internet access. And remember how we talked about GPS satellites being this single point of failure? That matters because we've built a civilization that depends on these satellites working perfectly. Most people don't even know this dependency exists, but it's why multiple countries are building their own satellite navigation systems. The timing function is too critical to depend on someone else's satellites. The question isn't whether satellites help you watch YouTube. They obviously do, just not in the way most people think. The question is whether you'll recognize the difference between the visible infrastructure you interact with and the invisible infrastructure that makes everything possible. Because now you know that cables carry the data while satellites keep the time. Both are essential. Neither works without the other. You can't unknow this now. Every time YouTube loads instantly, you'll realize there are cables in the ground and timing signals from space working together. Every time you use GPS, you'll know those same satellites are keeping the internet synchronized. Every time someone talks about wireless internet, you'll understand that wireless is just the last 20 feet. Everything else is cables all the way down. So next time you're watching a video on your phone, look up at the sky for a second. Those satellites aren't sending you the video, but they're sending something more important. They're broadcasting the universal time that every computer on Earth checks constantly to stay coordinated. They're the conductors of the largest orchestra in human history, and without them, the whole symphony falls apart within hours.